runaway train now, I can't get off.
It's a runaway train. You can't get off if you want to get off. Okay. Welcome to the Facebook Live, A Course in Miracles. Course in Miracles here at 1 o'clock here Mountain Time. And I count when we get into what the subject is that we're going to be talking about today, it kind of explains why it is that why we are where we are. Let me see. Let me get there.
Yeah.
We've been wondering.
You've been wondering?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been wondering a lot.
Everybody's wondering why they are where they are.
What the hell?
Is there any part of this that I cannot auto-record?
You can just record any of it.
Thank you.
Yeah. You can do it all. You can do it all. So let's acknowledge ourselves for being here. Let's get some energy going in the room. Yes. Welcome to A Course in Miracles. Those of you on Facebook Live, want to welcome you. And I'm excited. There's nothing that I love doing more than sharing A Course in Miracles. And especially in terms of sharing the definitions that the Course in Miracles gives for the terminology that it uses, because after, this will be 38 years of teaching and sharing and learning the Course in Miracles, and what I've seen over the years is how much the ego mind, the monkey mind, the program mind, the Course says is so great at taking very simple but profound concepts and making them try to be really complex so that we can claim we don't understand it and then sometimes not do it. So we're going to be on page 56, chapter 4 in the Foundation for Inner Peace version of the Course in Miracles. Got a few extra copies over here off to the side. And it's chapter 4, The Illusions of the Ego, and it's section 2, Ego and False Autonomy. Ego and False Autonomy. Ego and False Autonomy. Page 56, chapter 4, in the Foundation for Inner Peace version of the Course in Miracles. And want to go very quickly over the guidelines. The guidelines are, you don't have to believe it. You don't have to accept it. You don't have to welcome it. Some of it's going to be hard to believe. Some of it's going to be startling. But if you use the ideas, then you will see that the ideas are true. I'm going to try to bring that in just a little bit more so I can see the comments. See, I know that Course in Miracles works miracles, because if I'm able to read that, and actually I can see it. See, I know something's going on because I can actually see what it's saying. But I had a little, like the Course says, it's insane to think you need little pieces of glass in front of your eyes in order for you to see correctly. Well, in that case, I got an insane mind. I do. Okay. And I'd like to invite you to get what my point is as a teacher. My point as a teacher and facilitator of the Course in Miracles is to hear the message. Because the one thing I've noticed over the years is in most times with the Course in Miracles, people are analyzing something that they're not studying. And since they're not studying it, then it's hard to move forward in the message, because the temptation is to try to fit the Course in Miracles into your thought system, rather than going, I'm going to lay my thought system over to the side for a minute, and then I'm going to let myself just hear what it's saying first before I start to attack it. I need to hear what it's saying. And the 4 stages of accepting the truth that he gives in the workbook, I think it's in the workbook lesson, I can elect to change all thoughts that hurt. I might be wrong about that. But he said the first stage is hearing it. First you have to hear it, then you repeat it, and then the third stage is you still repeat it, but you start to accept it with some reservations. And then the 4th stage of accepting a new idea is then you accept it. So first I got to hear it, then I got to repeat it. I'm going to repeat it even though I'm having some reservations about it. And then finally I'll accept it as true. And when you accept it as true, then that's when you perceive it in your physical world, because the Course teaches that our perception is based on what we've learned, and that most people don't know that perception is learning, because just the mere act of looking, you're defining, you're evaluating, you're labeling, and you're classifying, and then you're doing that according to what? What you've learned. So what if what you've learned wasn't based on the truth? Then that means everything that you're seeing is not really true, even though it will look like it's true to you, because perception, the cool thing or the not so cool thing about perception is that it witnesses to what you believe. So that's why I don't ever argue with people about their experiences or what they say they're going through, because I know in their experience that seems very true for them. Like, I've had nothing but an incredible experience of being in Colorado for almost 20 years now. All I've met is really loving people. I've had an incredible time. I've enjoyed myself. It's been the friendliest people that I've been around, and I've been traveling over the world for a long time. And then I meet somebody that goes, I hate Colorado. I can't wait till I get out of here. It's the most unfriendly place I've ever been. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And it never dawns on them that just might be their perception. Right. It might have something to do with them. And sometimes people who accuse people of not being friendly are not very friendly themselves. Yeah. It's like if you watch them, they're not the first people to greet people or to smile at people, and then they'll say everybody else is not nice. So the ego, and also what I like to do with the Course in Miracles, since I've studied it so long, is help people who are trying to get into it and tackle it themselves. So I'm much more interested in being a messenger than I am being an analyzer. Okay, so let's go through the first paragraph. So it says the ego and false autonomy. One of the things that you'll notice when you study the Course is that when it says the ego and false autonomy, you could say the ego is false autonomy. Wherever you see a conjunction, you could change that to is, and you have a new definition of a word. So the ego is false autonomy. The ego is the part of you that believes that you're on your own, you're self-sufficient, and you're doing it by yourself. Basically, what the Course suggests is there's no such thing as a self-made man or woman. There's no such thing as anybody doing anything alone by themselves. I doubt if you made the clothes you're wearing, the shoes you have on, the car you drove over here, the book you're holding in your hand, I bet you didn't do any of those things. Yeah. Right, so that pretty much blows the theory that we did stuff alone or that we're doing anything alone. But it's funny that people will say that. So the Course says, I love this, it says it's reasonable to ask how the mind could ever have made the ego. Okay, it's reasonable to ask, notice it said how the mind could ever have made the ego. How did you make the ego? So what we want to do is take a lot of the abstractness off of the ego by me giving you a few definitions of the ego that you can kind of use, maybe the one that you can substitute when you see the word ego, which is fear. A fearful mind, a fearful thought, the Course says it's an ego. The separated mind, the part of us that thinks it's separate, is the ego. And the ego is what you think you are. It's your self-concept. So it's important let's keep the Course simple. It's only talking about the part of our mind that's fear-based versus the part of our mind that's love-based. And it says if you're fear-based, you're going to see a fearful world. If you're love-based, you're going to see a loving world. If you keep changing your mind, you're going to keep seeing both. Because that's what the world of duality is like. What is the world of duality? Well, if you got two different ways of thinking, then you're going to have two worlds that you're looking at. Not two worlds that you're looking at. You're going to have two worlds perceptions that you're going back and forth between. I'm going to go back and forth between having a peaceful perception and a conflicting perception. Now, the fear-based part of the mind called the ego, the Course says it can only exist through conflict and fear, because it's fear that makes you feel separate. So one of the prime components in being separate is to be in some form of fear or conflict. All right, now, if the part of my mind that is rooted in fear and conflict, that part wants to survive, which obviously it does, because it has a whole world that reflects it, then that part of the mind is always following one rule according to the Course, which is seek and do not find. So it always makes you want what's not available right now. It's the part of the mind that never wants what it can have and always wants what it looks like it doesn't have. So your ego is constantly, has a vested interest in keeping some form of conflict and fear and anger and guilt going. So what does the ego do? What is the main thing that part of the mind does? It endlessly gets you to come up with things outside yourself that you think is going to make you happy, that you then search for. I'll say it again. It's the part of your mind that endlessly comes up with fantasies and ideas and things that you think is going to make you happy that you don't have right now, that you seek for. And the Course says the way you can tell whenever it's your ego or your false self, another term, your false self has gotten for you is that when you get it, you're not satisfied. So anything that anything you get through the fear mind, the ego mind, the separated mind, it for a second it pleases you, and then all of a sudden you're right back on the hunt again. Okay, so an awakening being is someone who sees that they're like the rabbit chasing the carrot, and they decide to stop. And they go, I'm not going to do that anymore, right? But it makes your ego feel useless, immobilized, and it will say it's bored, or that you're not doing as it takes drama to be exciting. Fear-based people need lots of drama to make their life exciting. So fear-based people keep one drama after another drama after another drama. So it says it's reasonable to ask how the mind could ever have made fear, the fear-based mind, the ego. It says, in fact, it's the best question you can ask. So when you study the Course, present it to yourself like a series of questions, and you'll get it faster. It's reasonable to ask how the mind could ever have made the ego. In fact, it is the best question you could ask. What is the best question I can ask? How the mind could ever have made fear? There is, however, no point in giving an answer in terms of the past. In terms of what? How your mind could ever have made fear. Is no point in giving an answer in terms of the past, because the past doesn't matter. The Course in Miracles is full of universal laws. So one of the definitions of past in the Course is gone. Those of us from the South call it gone. Okay, I like to say gone. Okay, so there is no point in giving an answer in terms of the gone, because the gone doesn't matter. That's why it's funny when I find myself saying I want to let go of the past. How can you not let go of what's already gone? So really, it's kind of funny to even say it. You don't have any choice but to let go of the past. That's not a choice. So it's basically saying, will you let it go in your mind, because it's gone. So the Course then says history wouldn't exist if the same errors weren't being repeated in the present. That's right. As soon as you forget what happened, I love it. He says, when you forget the lessons that you should have learned in the past, you're going to repeat them again. Let me give you an example. Some people, when they have a relationship from hell, they break up, and then they decide they're not going to be in relationships for a while, right? And then they wait a long time before they get into another relationship, and they think that just because they waited a long time, that means they're ready for a relationship again. But they didn't do anything to correct their thinking in the meantime, because what their ego tells them is the problem wasn't them and had nothing to do with them. It was the other person's fault. So why should I work on myself? Because, it was your fault to begin with that the relationship ended. So they don't work on themselves. And so they'll wait for a while, and then they'll enter another relationship with the exact same attitude that they had before and recreate it. And because there's been a long period of time, they just repeat it again. Like he says, history wouldn't repeat itself if we weren't making the same mistakes that we made in the past. And if I wait a long time, forget, and didn't even try to find out what the mistake was, then I'm going to do what I call my pattern. And then it's going to seem like I'm going through the same pattern over and over again. Then the Course says, Abstract thought applies to knowledge because knowledge is completely impersonal. So abstract thought is knowledge, and knowledge is impersonal, which means that what is true applies to everything and everybody. That's what makes it impersonal. That's what makes it knowledge. Nobody's left out. It applies to all equally. And the Course says knowledge is beyond what we can have at this level. That what we have at this level is perception.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
so the next stage is knowledge then?
Yeah. You go from false perception to true perception to knowledge, which the Course defines as absolute certainty. So sometimes when I see the word knowledge in the Course in Miracles, I'll say absolute certainty. And just little things like that with the definitions of the Course will give this book a whole new meaning. So let's say absolute certainty is completely impersonal. Whatever I'm absolutely sure about, I'm going to use that in every situation. Without, even though that's, think about that. If I'm absolutely sure that I start my car with a key, I'm not going to take my shoe off to try to start it. So if I'm absolutely certain, I'm going to use it in the situations consistently. So don't forget now, your ego is going to try to complicate this, and I'm not going to let you for my hour or so, okay? I'm not going to be distracted off into the analyzation realm, okay? I'm going to tell you that right now, all right? Because my inner guidance is the main thing that a messenger should do is deliver the message, and deliver the message as clearly as possible. It's not the messenger's responsibility to get you to understand the message. You know what I'm saying? The mailman, I don't mind helping you understand what this section is saying. But I can't counsel you in a class on how you're going to apply this to everything in your experience. That's not really fair to everybody in the room, actually. So what we want to do is we want to hear it. Okay, so what is it saying? It's saying perception, it's saying abstract thought applies to knowledge because knowledge is completely impersonal and examples are irrelevant to the understanding of knowledge. Perception, however, is always specific and therefore what? Quite concrete. So knowledge is abstract, but perception is specific. This is specific. What is it? Concrete. Perception is form. Perception is concrete. Knowledge is abstract. Perception is concrete. So what was the main point that they made? First of all, it's okay to ask how you could ever made the ego. That's a very reasonable question. Wow. But don't think about it in terms of the past, because the past doesn't matter. And if we weren't already doing the same mistakes over and over again, then history wouldn't be repeating itself. How do you know if you're repeating the same thing over again? If you're feeling fear and conflict, unhappiness, fear and conflict, dissatisfaction, fear and conflict, which is the same thing over and over again, even if it looks like it's happening through different people in different situations, you're not doing nothing different. You're not required because the end result's the same. You're still not happy. You're still dissatisfied. And your ego is still telling you the thing that the Course says the ego always says. If this were different, I'd be happy. If they were different, I would be happy. If I was in another circumstance, I'd be happy. If something outside of myself changed, I'd be happy. That's the ego. That's what the ego false self is going to tell you over and over again until one day you wake up and you'll see you like a rabbit chasing a carrot that you can never reach, like at a dog track or something. And all of a sudden you're going to get, oh, I must be doing the same thing. Why? Because I'm feeling the same way. What's that? Unhappy, stressed, miserable, And it's one of the toughest things to do is when you hear your ego saying the stuff that it's always said, for you to get to the point that you let it say whatever it's got to say, you let it say what it's always said, the part of your mind is always telling you what you need to be concerned about, worried about, what's not right, and you just let it say what it says, but you don't do what it says. You don't follow its orders. Most people spend too much time trying to get rid of their ego. As long as you're in the body, you're going to have one. You're going to think you're separate as long as you're in the body. So it's not about getting rid of your ego. It's about not paying attention to it. And stop trying to get rid of it. You're never going to have it. You're going to sometimes feel up and down based on how you're interpreting things. So, and what was the other thing? It says that if it's true, if it's abstract, if it's knowledge, it's impersonal. If it's of the ego, if it's of fear, it's going to be specific and concrete. Very simple differences. Abstract, concrete. So, any questions about how it started off in that first paragraph? Any comments about it? You can make comments about it.
What could be another word for abstract?
Another term for abstract would
knowledge.
Another word for abstract would be knowledge, would be absolute certainty, would be true love, real love. Because don't forget, when you study the course, if you want to make it simple, as soon as you get into I wonder what this means, always go, is it love or is it fear? So abstract knowledge would be in the realm of love, not the ego. The ego can't do abstract knowledge. So the Course in Miracles, what the Course in Miracles has done is it makes itself as complicated as a person needs for it to be in order to study it. And most people can't handle simplicity. So it has to make it seem like it's really complex to even engage our ego. Let me show you what I mean. It's reasonable to ask how the mind could have ever made fear. In fact, it's the best question you could ask. There's, however, no point in giving an answer in terms of the past because the past doesn't matter, and history would not exist if the same errors were not being repeated in the present. Love applied. My ego is trying to strangle me right now. It does not want me to talk to you. Where's my throat stuff? Thank you. Another speaker.
Holy Spirit.
It's so funny. There's a part of me that doesn't want to say this to you, and there's a part of you that don't want to hear.
Oh yeah.
So together, just don't kill me before the class. Don't have me kill. Don't have me just die for this. Like I wonder how he died.
No way. No way.
Another great. So like what I was getting ready to say. Abstract thought. Love applies to knowledge because knowledge is completely impersonal. See, love is impersonal. That's the hardest thing for ego minds to get, is that there's no such thing as personal love. There's personal specialness, but not personal love. But we can pretend. But we can pretend that love is personal, but it's really impersonal. And so it says. So instead of saying abstract thought, you could say love applies to knowledge, because knowledge is completely impersonal.
Take a minute. We're all right. We're all good.
And perception, which is fear, is always specific and therefore quite concrete. Love is impersonal, fear is specific. Love is impersonal, fear is specific. So a fearful mind is specific. A separated mind is specific. So what are you getting ready to say?
What I'm hearing in my mind, or what I'm defining as love would be more like freedom. It's allowing. True love is actually freedom, whereas specialness or fear is all about labels and boxes and
Absolutely.
Yeah,
conditions.
totally.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The conditions make it a lot more focused and concrete, right?
Anybody else?
So we have a few online great conversation already going on here. Several of them promising to come to Colorado, so that'll be fun. But one of the overall responses from that paragraph that's really resonating is that it's not about getting rid of the ego, it's about not listening to the ego.
That's right. That's right. That's easy. That's easier.
Yeah. And then
Because-
Demola is saying we're all abstract spiritual beings having a concrete experience of physicality just because we can.
And I is only what the ego says. So that's the other thing people don't realize. The minute you say I, you and your ego. Just the word I is the ego. Because that's me separating myself off from everybody else. So I is an ego concept. When you really wake up to who you really are, you won't even use the word I anymore. Yeah.
So when you were saying, the ego's going to talk, and not to listen to it, so then I need to accept that I'm going to analyze and not be like, oh, don't analyze. But I need to accept that I'm going to analyze and just like you've told me before that the highest form of analyzation is to discern.
Yeah.
So then, okay, I need to just notice when I'm starting to analyze, which is like 99% of the time, I tell myself, well, how can I use this to discern
Right.
to the Holy Spirit?
Which is simply means to sort out, right? Which is just what he just did. If it's coming from love, it's abstract, it's impersonal, sort out. If it's coming from my ego and fear, it's very specific and concrete. That's sorting out, right?
Yeah.
So now you're using your ability to sort out in a way that doesn't limit you. That's one of the things I love about using the tool of astrology and numerology with people, is because it does what you just said. Okay, how can you best use your natural nature in a way that will bring you to love the fastest? You know, because the Course in Miracles teaches that there's anything that you've made, the Holy Spirit, the higher self, the divine self can use that as a tool to awaken. That's why whatever it is you're good at, I'm not going to stop using my knowledge of astrology because I'm studying the Course. I'm not going to stop using my knowledge of how to drive a car because I'm studying the Course. You don't go, I'm studying the Course in Miracles, so I'm going to forget how to drive a car over here. Mm-hmm. But then we have other things we'll judge and say, well, Earl, because you're studying the Course, then you shouldn't be using this particular tool. No, it's a lot easier to meet me where I am, take the skills that I have, and teach me how to transcend them to the truth. So the truth works with where you are. Mm-hmm. It's not asking you to turn your whole life upside down in order for you to be happy. It's saying that the way that you could be, what you already know could be used for a tool of awakening.
You know, one thing I like about what the Course says often, though, is like, whatever experience I'm having is a direct reflection of whatever I give the most value to. Mm-hmm. And so as someone who can definitely fall into analyst, you know, what I think the Course has taught me to ask myself is, why am I valuing trying to understand more than peace? Like, what part of me would want to, what part of me wants to think I know every aspect of this rather than to give myself peace, and not in a judgmental way, in a way that like allows for me to have that, but it's just like kind of questioning what part of me is valuing that more than peace right
That's
now.
right. That's right. Because he says our understanding is we think our understanding is a powerful contribution to the truth, but it isn't. We spend a lot of time trying to understand, and that's a waste of time. You will not ever understand everything at the level of perception. So it's stupid to think I'm going to understand everything before I can move forward in my experience. That's the trick. I'm going to make sure I get you next, darling.
Okay.
All right.
I love the word abstract, because coming from the field of psychology, abstract is representative of expansion of the mind. Mm-hmm. Because we use abstract concepts for things that are indefinable. Mm-hmm. Like we'll say the universe, that's an abstract concept. Mm-hmm. And so what this reads for me is that which is indefinable is the true knowledge. Mm-hmm. Right? And when I try to define it, I'm then minimizing it.
Exactly. That's why he said knowledge is beyond perception.
Right.
Knowledge is just, I love it. Knowledge is just beyond the way you see things.
Yeah.
That's basically what he's saying. Yeah. Darling, no, you finished?
I was not.
Okay, go ahead.
And so as I minimize, I create fear, because then it's something that I think isn't big enough, but I don't know how to make it bigger. So if I define myself, which is this indefinable thing, as being this human body, now I'm afraid because there's pieces of me that aren't answered by that definition. And so I create fear through my definitions.
That's right. Yeah. It says that another term for ego is definition. It says it later in the book, which is funny you said that. Darlene.
So I love this whole concept that if knowledge is not specific, then what I've been noticing happening so often is that truth will come through so many different ways. Like there's truth in Buddhism, and there's truth in Hindu, and there's truth in Abraham Hicks, and there's truth in the Course in Miracles in there, and it doesn't have to be limited how it comes through.
Absolutely. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
Thank goodness. That was the problem that I had with the Bible, the way it was being taught when I was growing up. I was told, well, this is it. This is the only way, and if you don't do it this way, you're not going to make it. And it would be like the way my group does it. It was like, even within that, they would say, it's my church, it's this church. that has it, you know. And so it's really good to know. And I don't have any illusions about that in teaching the course. That's why I want the people to watch my classes who want to learn in this particular form. But there are other forms of getting it, but this is the way it reached me, so I know I can't be alone in that, and Holy Spirit knows who it is that would want to do it the way that it comes through me. So you'll never be alone in whatever you're doing.
So that is what always bothered me too, like there's only one book
Yeah.
for a fundamentalist Christian. It's the Bible. That's the only book there is. That's the only way you can get this, and if you don't get it this way, you don't get it.
That's right.
And it makes no sense.
And that's the very definition of ego.
That's the very
Yes.
definition. And to think of it, now, there's one truth.
Mm-hmm.
There's one whatever it is. There's whatever it is, but there are many ways to get to it. Yeah.
So I'm curious then if we're using words to communicate right now, and these words feel very defined, we have specific definitions with them, and it's very focused.
Mm-hmm.
So even just using words could be a reflection of the ego.
That's also, but it's also an example of what the Course says about whatever we've learned can be used.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
You know, the same thing,
Let's wake
because
up.
just like words could be used to put us to sleep,
Mm-hmm.
it make us not know the truth. Words are neutral, so words could also be used as a means of waking us up. He talks about that. Our words are symbols of symbols. They're actually twice removed from reality. For instance, you call this a body. That's a word. I'm not a body. So that means that word body is twice removed from reality. I'm not a body, and you're looking at the body, that's not me.
Yeah.
So words are always 2 steps away. That's one of the biggest frustrations I'm experiencing right now, is I'm achieving levels of consciousness and self-realization that words absolutely do not work. Especially if you're trying to describe to anybody else. CJ and I were just joking about that the other day, how, you know, we can say the same word and we'll both have completely different interpretations of what we just said to each other. And so that's why we always check in to try to see, how do you seeing what I just said? Rather than just assuming that she understood what I just got to saying the way that I meant it. But if you have a core belief that you're not going to attack each other, and that your goal is peace, and you're going to give each other freedom, and you're going to let each other be, then the words really don't matter, ultimately, because you're going to be loving toward each other no matter what, and that's the only thing that really matters, actually, you know. So it's awesome.
The first sentence, or the first section, talked about fear based on history is meaningless, and that concept I understand. Is there some level of fear that is reasonable based on future? So if I'm in a transition period, and it's, you know, naturally things are very uncertain, even enlightenment, right? Even growing, there's, you know, if you're changing your pattern, there's things that are uncertain. So
any form of uncertainty is a form of fear. For whatever reason because it means in that moment you're out of the now. That the minute I go into fear, I've gone into a story. I've gone into a story about something that's happened in the past or something that may happen in the future, and then that's keeping me from focused in the only time there is, which is now. So from a Course perspective, which I say would drive our ego crazy, is if I'm having any form of doubt, any form of uncertainty, that's a form of fear. And so, but when I get into my love self, which means I know at that point that I am loved, I am lovable, I'm okay, I'm eternal. There's nothing missing. I'm connected to Source. Because the truth is, all of our plans are coming from our lack of belief in God.
Yeah.
If you just really want to get real,
Yeah.
The reason why we're making plans is we don't think that there's something that can take care of us except us. That's really what it. People don't like to admit it, but that's all it is. I don't care. I don't care what plan you think you're making. You're making that plan if it has anything to do with your happiness in the future and being safe in the future, is because I don't really recognize that I have a loving Creator that is sustaining me and that can sustain me and is sustaining me and will sustain me all the time. So one of the lines that the Course in Miracles says in one of the workbook lessons, I think it's about defending myself, I'm attacked. He talks about how the healed mind doesn't plan. A healed mind carries out a plan that comes from a wisdom greater than its own. So to somebody on the outside, it'll look like you're planning, but you aren't planning. You're carrying out a plan. That's different. Carrying out a plan is different from you making up a plan. So it'll look like in time, it's going to look like you are making a plan, but really you're following orders. Because the Holy Spirit is the part of God that's aware that we think we're separate and that we think we're here. And it's the part of us that knows that we are connected to source. So he says it's the intermediary between the mind that's afraid and thinks that it's separate, and the part of it that's total love and total knowledge. And the Holy Spirit is that part of us that heals that part of us that thinks we're separate from God. And it says, and the book says it over and over again, you can't do it. You can't do it. You can't do it. You cannot do it. You cannot do it. Which is uncomfortable when you haven't gotten to the point that you have faith in your Creator yet. So it makes perfect sense to me why people don't jump up and down when they hear they can't do it. Because that presupposes that there's some part of you that can, but if you're afraid, that actually means you don't know that there's the part of you that can. So it's really great that the Creator is smarter than us.
Yeah.
And also great that no matter what you think and what you feel or what you believe about yourself, you are loved, you are guided, and you're going to be helped. See, that's what we need to focus in on. So the next...
I just had a quick comment.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to thank you for what you said about how, like, you're getting these ideas and you don't know how to express them in words. Because I get that a lot.
Yeah.
But then what happens with me is then I'm like, okay, well, I gotta put this in words so that then because then that's the only way. Because then I can get it. If I put it in words, that's the only way I can get it. And then I get it, and then I'm like, and then I lose the message.
Well, the Course says a lot of stuff that's insulting to the ego. The Course says basically most questions are just an attempt of the ego to interrupt the train of thought that's being said because it feels threatened. That most questions he said the ego is the part of us that can ask endless questions but never perceive a meaningful answer. So no matter how many answers you give the ego part of the mind, it's just going to stir another question. Because the ego part of the mind is not interested in an answer. It's just trying to disrupt what's being said because what's being said is threatening to it. So if I'm hearing something that my ego doesn't want to hear because the truth is so intense, it's going to say, hey, wait a minute, I got a question about that. And he says an honest question is when you ask a question and you have no idea what the answer is. But if you ask a question and you already think you got an idea in your mind what it should be, that is not a real question. That's a person looking for validation to whatever it is they already believe, which isn't an honest question. You know, a little kid, you tell a little kid this is a banana and they ask you what this is, the kid is going to immediately start calling it what? A banana. They're not going to argue with you about what it is because they had no idea. Adults almost never ask a question like that. Because part of the definition of being an adult is that you're self-sufficient, you're autonomous, and you know what the answer is, or you should know what the answer is. And one of the lines in the Course of Love, he says one of the things that slows down people experiencing healing and help and happiness is that adults tend not to want to accept answers that they didn't think of, even if it's right. Even if the answer would help them. The fact that I didn't think of it, I'll resist using it because the ego mind, the adult mind are so programmed that you should know. How many times have somebody asked you something and you knew you didn't know the answer, but you thought you needed to kind of make up one anyway? Why? Because you're an adult. You're supposed to know. So you got kind of like make it up even if you don't know. You know. So let me get to the next paragraph. It says, because this one right here, if we don't get any further than this one, this says something that we need to blaze in our mind. It says, everyone makes an ego or what? A little self. Notice that's a small s. So another term for the ego is what? The little self, right? Mm-hmm. So everyone makes an ego or a self for himself, which is subject to enormous variation. Why? Because of its instability. You know, why do I go through so many moods? Because I'm unstable and I have a lot of constantly changing interpretations of every moment. This moment is good, that moment is bad, this one is hot, that one's cold, you're nice, you're not so. He says we make up a self that is unstable, and so we make up a self that's unstable, so it's subject to enormous variation, But here's the key sentence that's a mind boggler if you really let yourself hear it. He says, he also makes an ego for everyone else he perceives, which is equally variable. So what are you talking about, Holy Spirit? I'm making up an image of myself and who I think I am that's constantly changing. But guess what? I'm making up an ego for every one of you sitting in this room with me right now. Each one of you, I have an idea about you. And that idea about you is me making up an ego for you. And then all of you all have an ego that you've made up for me. So all of you all will have different interpretations about who and what you think I am. And he says we do that for everybody. So what you think of as your mama is not your mama. That's the ego you've put on your mama. You know, whatever you think about your mate, you made it up. You say you're making up an image for yourself, and you're making up an image for everybody around you. The next sentence is equally powerful. It says their interaction is a process that alters both. Okay, so I'm making up an image of me, and then I'm making up an image of you. So what I think about you changes your ego. And then what I think about you changes my ego relative to you. Let me give you a little simple, like if I think that she's a person that doesn't like me, then that's also going to affect the image I have of myself also. So just me making up an image for myself and an image of her and then thinking about her is changing her ego and my ego at the same time. And just think, and she doesn't even know about it. She's at the grocery store, right? And you know you've done it. You know you've done it. You have thought about somebody and just went through a whole thing in your mind about what you think they're about, how you can feel about them, what you think they've done, and then how you think they're reacting to you. Now notice the person involved is nowhere around, and he's saying their interaction is a process that alters both. What do you mean both? My ego and your ego. Why? Because the images you are making, the egos you are making, were not made by or with God. Another term for God in the Course in Miracles, when you see those capital letters, is unalterable. I love that. Ooh. So another term for God is the unalterable. What does that mean? I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you, and nothing's going to change that. I love you, I love you, I love you, and nothing's going to change that. And I love you, and I love you, and nothing's going to change that. Nothing can change that. Nothing will ever change that. It's going to constantly increase, but the Course says even the increase isn't change because it was created to increase. So it's still doing what it was made to do, so it's really not changing. Wow. So the truth is, if God, so say love, another term for love, what is the unalterable? You cannot lose love. You can only lose specialness. You cannot lose love. You can only lose specialness. You all can change your mind about how you feel about me if I'm special to you. That's right. And so I don't trust specialness personally. I just don't. I'm sorry. I've had too many people in my life tell me I was special and change their mind by making up an ego for me that they reacted to. And I have too. You understand what I'm saying? So you can make me special. That's great. I'll enjoy that temporary attention that you're going to give me. And I hope I have sense enough to say thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Because I'll be sincerely be thankful for the specialness you're showing. If it's the good kind. You know, but don't think for a second that Earl thinks that he can depend on that. Because that way you can't hurt me. And so therefore there's nothing to forgive you for if you stop. See, if I didn't expect you to do it in the first place, then there's no reason for me to get upset if that changes, because he's already told me it's going to change. The truth has already told me. The one thing you can count on about perception or ego is that it's going to change. It's going to change. But he says it can change two ways. It can change in a more loving way, or it can change in a more fearful way. It can change in a more innocent way, or it can change but it's going to change. He says in the book that the only thing that doesn't change is the will of God. So if it's not love, you know it's going to change. So is the world going to change? Yes. Is the world going to ultimately change for the better? Yes. It doesn't have any choice. If it's not love, it can't stay the same. So people get upset when they get into the truth, and sometimes it looks like their relationships go to hell. And they don't realize that really what's happened in that situation is that if it wasn't love, it couldn't last. If it's not love, it's not going to last. So be glad about that. That's not something to feel sad about. Be glad that if you're in a painful situation, it's guaranteed not to last. Because only love is real. Only love is real. Wow. So it says, it is important to realize, another powerful sentence, it is important to realize that this alteration between the way you see yourself and the way you see another person can and does occur as readily when the interaction takes place in the mind as when it involves physical proximity, which is what I just said earlier. You know, whatever I make up an ego for you. So when you think about a person, you're changing their ego. And when you think about yourself, you're changing your ego. That's what all it's saying. Think about it again. I'll say that again. Everyone makes up an ego or an image or a self of everybody they know. Try being siblings in the same family and then watch your brothers and sisters describe the same parents. And it'll be just like it was a different parent for each child. My brothers and sisters have told me things about my parents that I didn't know anything about in terms of their experience of my parents. You know, so that's true. Think about that now. That's true of everybody. You are making up an Earl Purdy ego right now.
You're special.
You know, right? That's what an Earl Purdy ego is. You know, that's why I tell people, don't put me on a pedestal because you just get better aim. That's all that means, is that you'll be able to get a better. Because I've never been idolized by anybody in my teaching career that did not end up crucifying me later. And every teacher goes through a crucifixion experience. I've never met a teacher who did not go through what appears to be the people who cared about them the most turning on them. Just like what happened with Jesus. That's just normal when you put yourself in that kind of position, because their ego hates your guts and their real self loves and appreciates you. And that's what's happening all the time when somebody's giving you love and the truth. The ego fears love. The real part of you loves love. But don't you think for a second that your ego loves people that treat you kindly, because the ego is the part of according to the Course, I'm not talking about regular psychology. According to the Course, the ego is the part of the mind that believes in separation. It believes in death. He said, what do you think death comes from? It doesn't come from God. He said death comes from your belief in it. It doesn't come from God willing that you die. You all say stuff like the one thing you can count on is death and taxes. So you're so certain you're going to die. Why are you shocked that you appear to go through it? Makes sense to me.
Right.
Thinking about another ego is as effective in changing relative perception as is physical interaction. So I don't have to physically interact with you to completely change my mind about you into a more loving perception of you. I do not, it's like the Holy Spirit tells me all the time now whenever I make myself upset about something, don't you dare tell yourself that the way out of this is to get this other person to change. You get to the point that the voice of the Holy Spirit will just be firm with you at a certain stage. It stops kidding around with you. Your happiness does not have one single thing to do with this person changing. If you come up with a solution that says that's the ultimate solution, you are in your ego. Because now you're convincing yourself again that happiness is not internal, that happiness is external. So you do what you think you need to do, but don't make it about trying to make the other person be different in order for you to be happy. And even if you communicate to them, good. If you feel like you need to communicate, communicate. But the more you wake up, the less you'll be doing that. I guarantee you, the more you become more conscious, the less you're going to want to try to interact with another person's ego, because it's just your own ego that's making you mad to begin with. And it has nothing to do with that other person's ego. That's just a fact. Now, our ego mind doesn't want to hear that. It wants to be convinced that if the other person spoke or acted differently, you'd be happy. That's the trick. That is always the trick. It will always be the trick, and it will always keep you from having any kind of permanent happiness. Now, I also realize that we could all collectively come up with 1,000 examples as to where there should be exceptions in what I just said.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but that doesn't mean that the book didn't say it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Sure, we can all go with our yes buts, but if you were to stop and think for a minute, you would absolutely see how that's true. You would absolutely, if your happiness is dependent on my behavior, you are in a powerless position, because, Paris, I can decide I ain't going to do nothing you say.
Mm-hmm.
And so you could talk until you blue in the face, and I might not change nothing about my behavior to make you happy. So are you going to be unhappy the rest of your life now?
Mm-mm. Oh, hell no.
Okay, well, that's what it's saying. That's what it's saying. And people don't want to accept that that's true in every situation. But that's what it's saying. It can sound logical. It can sound reasonable. But you're putting yourself in a position of powerlessness, because you can't control another person's behavior at this level. So I just want to get away from thinking the idea works. It doesn't mean I might not give you the option. It doesn't mean I might not say to you, but I'm going to put it like this. I'm making myself upset about blah, 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 blah. You know, how do you feel about that? Or is there anything you feel like you would be willing to do to support that, you know, going beyond that? I'm not saying you wouldn't communicate. I'm saying the truth says, if you tell yourself that everything outside of you needs to be different for you to be happy, that's your ego. That's an impossible dream. And the sooner you realize that, he said, the sooner you'll be happy permanently. And now I used to fight with that, and that's how I know I've changed my mind, because now what I used to fight with, I feel relieved about. Because now I don't have to expend a lot of needless energy in a direction that doesn't work. So I actually feel better. Whether people, what you mean I need to get my girlfriend to start cooking me some catfish? You know, it's like, no. Your happiness is not dependent on catfish, because you've had catfish before, and now you want some more. You know what I'm saying? Right? The ego is going to always give you temporary satisfaction. I remember Rajneesh, who was an Osho, said in one of his books that he was talking about sex. He had a book on sex, and he said, if you ever did it right one time, you wouldn't have to do it no more. Because you would be complete. You know, like there was a point that I didn't ride tricycles anymore.
Yeah.
I was complete with tricycles. There is going to be a point you're going to be complete with physical sex or physical food or physical anything. And because you're going to be experiencing something so much more enjoyable and so much more pleasurable and so much. It's like somebody giving you $5 in return for a quarter. You're not going to miss the quarter. But if you still got a penny, the quarter's still looking good to you. So you still caught up in the illusion, you know.
Did he offer a help too?
Yeah. It's do it without guilt. If you could ever have any experience completely without guilt and in total innocence, it would never run you again.
Wow.
You'd be perfectly okay if you did it or never did it again.
Wow.
Absolutely. We haven't done it in innocence yet.
Is that why it's a compulsion for some people?
Yeah, that's for you. I thought you was talking about a friend. I thought you was talking about a friend, buddy. I don't know.
Me too. I'm here for a friend.
I'm here for a friend too. He calls a sexual impulse a misdirected miracle impulse, which I think is a really interesting statement. The way he puts that, what he's basically saying is that we really want to join and connect at this really deep, fundamental level that's even beyond the body.
Yeah.
But what we'll take it to mean is, I want to have sex with
Yeah.
you. But what I really want to do is connect with you at a really deep spiritual level and recognize our oneness and their desire to express love to you. And then and then the ego goes, oh no, I want to get laid. That's what it is. You know what I'm saying? Okay. That's and you all, and anybody that's had it, you know that doesn't completely satisfy you. You know it don't. You know, we be real adults in here. You know it don't completely satisfy you. Just like nothing here does. Right, it's temporary. Boy, that was a good meal. See me 24 hours later. I'm going to be wanting another meal. But I don't feel guilty about the meal. Stop feeling guilty about what you do with temporary things. and use it for love. Say, I want this to be symbolic of love. I want this to be an expression of love. I want this to be, because it's neutral, so what do you want to use it for? Actually, when you hear this correctly, it lets you off the hook completely.
That's right.
Anybody that hears this correctly, they don't feel more guilty, they feel relieved. And it says, there could be no better example that the ego is, see definition? The ego is only an idea and not a fact. So the ego is just a belief. It's just an idea. Siri really doesn't exist. Alexa, all these voice things, they really don't exist, but they can answer questions and they can sound like it, and you would actually think it's almost like a personality. That's where the ego is. The ego is a perfect example of that. It's just a program.
Wow.
We've been programmed what to value. We've been programmed what's good. We've been programmed what's bad. We've been programmed how relationships should work. We've been programmed that, what we should seek. Money, of course, says power, money, fame, and physical pleasure. And so you see everybody chasing the you're supposed to be married by the time you're such an age, and you're supposed to have children then you're supposed to get a house, and then you're supposed to retire and die. And people think they're failures if they haven't done that, especially at a certain age, And so I meet so many women and men now go, I don't want to have children. And they feel guilty because the society say, well, you're a woman, you got to want to have a baby. And they go, I don't. And I meet more and more that go, no, actually. Or I don't really need to have a special relationship. I'm good to go pretty much with myself. Don't have to. You're weird. You don't want to live with somebody? Well, no, actually, I think I like my peace. And that doesn't mean you can't have peace living with people. It's just more and more we're in the age of Aquarius, where people want to live their own individual lives the way they want to live it. That's the Aquarian way. You come together for a common humanitarian cause, but you use your own individuality in that, in order to do that, And so that's what we need to do now. This is an age where people are not going to be dictated to about how they should live their lives the way people allowed it in the past. They're not going to do it. So we're going to have to start, which is funny because I've never seen such divisiveness that I'm seeing in my outer culture as I'm seeing now. That you can't have, I remember when you could have a different political viewpoint and you could still be friends. Now it's gotten to the point that you're a friggin' enemy. It's like you're being treated like you're an absolute enemy if you have another political persuasion. Not like you just got another way of looking at it. It's really kind of ridiculous the way it is now. I'm gonna defriend you because you're a Republican. Mm-hmm. That's crazy. That's not the way it used to be at all. That's how laws got passed, because the Democrats and the Republicans would get together and work it out. Right. It wouldn't be like, this is it. I don't want to hear anything you got to say. And that's because the more we move toward the light, the part of us that is the darkness is coming up to be healed. So it says your own state of mind is a good example of how the ego was made. See, that's another joke if you hear it right. Your own state of mind is a good example of how fear was made. When you threw knowledge away, it is as if you never had knowledge. This is so apparent, what's so apparent? That you can throw knowledge away and it'll look like you never had it. This is so apparent that one need only recognize it to see that it happens. So if you can forget things that you used to know in the present, why is it so strange to think you could have done the same thing in the past? If you forget what you know right now, and you can throw knowledge away like when we leave here after this class.
Yeah.
Okay. Like as soon as we go.
Like even right now.
Like what did you say 5 minutes ago? Right? Yeah, I know.
When you walk out the door.
It's the most. I know those of you who read the course know what I'm talking about. You can be immersed and you can be reading it and you can be getting everything it's saying and the juice is jumping out the book.
Yeah.
And you can close it and you go,
what
I can't. And someone wants to say, now repeat 3 sentences out of what you just finished reading, and you go, huh? Right. So he says, if you can do that now, Why is it so strange to you that you may have done that in the past?
Yeah.
That you've done that a lot of times, new things, and then just threw that knowledge away.
Yeah.
Okay, and so the Course says, I love this, surprise is a reasonable response to the unfamiliar, though hardly to something that occurs with such persistence. Why are you surprised that you can throw knowledge away? You do it all the time. He says, but do not forget that the mind need not work that way. Work what way? Throwing away the knowledge. See, that's what you do with the Course. Every time you get to a point and it says something like, don't forget the mind need not work that way, then you go, well, what is that way? Don't you start making up what that means. It's right there before you, is what you learn when you study the Course. What do you mean that way? Right here, when you threw knowledge away as if you never had it. You don't have to throw knowledge. Your mind doesn't have to work that way. You can actually remember this game. We could remember that we're making up images for everybody around us and then interacting with what we think they are about.
Yeah.
And so every time you have an opinion, you know you're in your ego. If you're not dealing directly, you're just making it up in your mind, that's your ego. You know, if I go, all white people are blah, 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 all black people are blah, 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 all Colorado, you know what I'm saying? That's always ego. That's nothing but ego. You don't even know me, and you got an opinion about me, and you judging me, and you think that, you know what I'm about. That's totally your ego. But you're doing it for yourself more than me. Your life is a reflection of what you think about yourself. That's what you're living. You live in your self-image, and everything is mirroring it back. So how do I feel about myself? Well, how am I seeing the world? That's how I feel about myself. I think the world is a crappy place, and you can't trust anybody, and you got to be on the lookout, and that's the kind of person I think I am. That's the way I do. If I think, oh, I just see some Colorado's so cool, there's some loving people, some juicy, fun people, and everybody's so kind and loving. That's my image of myself. All right. Said, don't forget what? Oh, he says, think of the love animals have for their offspring and the need animals feel to protect their offspring, because animals regard their offspring as part of themselves. No one dismisses something they consider to be part of themselves. So why is it that I don't dismiss my ego? I think I am my ego. I think my ego is part of me. That's why I can't get rid of it so easily. And that's what it says right here. You react to your ego, your image of yourself that you made up, much as God does to you, with love, protection, and charity. I give my ego a lot of breaks. And I love my opinions, and I protect my opinions, and I'm very charitable toward the mistakes that I make in terms of how I perceive everything and everybody. But I'm not that charitable about anything else. Probably because I think my ego is part of me. I think I am what I think I am. And so when this book says that I'm not what I think I am, that's scary, because I think I am what I think I am. So it says, your reactions to your ego, which is what? The self you made. Definition of ego. The self you made. Your reactions to the self you made are not surprising. So you get to the point when you wake up that you're not surprised by anybody's ego anymore, because you know exactly what an ego is going to do. He says, in fact, your reactions to your ego resemble in many ways how you will one day react to your real self, your real creations. Right now, I'm going to be as loving and protective and charitable toward my true self as I am toward my false self. One day, I'm going to love my true self the way I've been loving my errors, my mistakes, my opinions, and my judgments. And then the Course says that your real creations, you can tell your real creations because they are as timeless as you are. So a real creation is eternal, and an unreal creation is temporary. So the Course defines it as making and creating. Since what we do is make stuff. We don't create stuff at this level. We just make stuff because none of it lasts, so it's all made up. So your real creations are eternal. So what does that mean? Your real creations are extensions of love. Your real creations are extensions of love. The question is not how you respond to the ego. So he says, throw out that question, how should I respond to the ego? And that's one of the most common questions you get. Well, how should I respond to my ego? How should I respond to the fear? How should I respond to the guilt? He says, no, the question is not how you respond to the ego, but what you believe you are. The real question is, what are you? Not how should you respond to the ego. He said, the real question you should be asking yourself is, what am I? You know, because I need to know I'm love. I need to know I'm eternal. I need to know I'm spirit. What am I? Not how should I respond to the ego. And then it says, belief is an ego function. So belief itself is a function of the separated fearful mind. It's only the ego that believes. That's deep. So even if I say I'm trying to believe, I'm in my ego. I'm in the separate self. And he says, belief is an ego function, and as long as your origin, where you came from, is open to belief, you are regarding your origin from an ego viewpoint. As long as you believe that what you are has to do with your belief, you're looking at it from an ego viewpoint. What you are has nothing to do with your belief. What you are has nothing to do with your belief. What you believe has everything to do with how you see what you are. But your belief has nothing. That's good news. What does that mean? That means I don't care what you think about yourself, you're loved. I don't care what you think about yourself, you're beautiful. I don't care what you think about yourself, you're an unlimited spiritual being. I don't care what you think about yourself, you are powerful, you are a treasure. See, that's what we need to focus on for an hour. What we are. And then when you have an ego thought, it won't be any big deal because you know it's not going to affect who you are. Okay, today I got a negative attitude about myself. Big friggin' deal. Because it can't change what I am. Then you would think it and you let it go. But if you really think it could affect you, then you're going to dwell on it all day long. All right? And then the last thing it says, I'm going to finish this paragraph and close it up. I love it. When teaching is no longer necessary, you will merely know God. When teaching is no longer necessary, you will merely know what? Love. So beyond teaching and learning is love. Wow. Belief that there is here's another one. Belief that there is another way of perceiving other than the fearful way, the ego way. He says, is the loftiest idea of which the ego thinking is capable. He's saying that, those of you who think you're separate and think that you're bodies, he said that the highest level that you can get to is getting to the point you believe there's another way of looking at things. So if you are at the level now that you believe there's another way you can look at things, he said that's the highest level of consciousness an ego mind can exist on. It's the level that says there's another way to look at this. I used to think it was all these other things you had to master. All your chakras and all your this and all your auras and your spirit. He said, no, if your butt could just get to the point you said there's another way to look at it, you get pretty much gone about as high as you can get. But that's the only height you need to be. Is the height that says I'm willing to look at it another way. And then it says, this is because believing that there's another way of perceiving contains a hint of the recognition that your ego is not yourself. That means you are finally beginning to get that your fear is not you, your images are not you, your ego is not you. So anybody that's sitting in this room that's sincerely saying there must be another way to look at whatever they're going through, they're on the highest level of consciousness that the separated ego mind can be on, because you're beginning to get a little hint of the recognition that you may not be what you think you are. You may not be your ego. You may not be your fear. You may not be your upset. All right, can we give it up? Yes. Whoa! Come on, give it up for you a little bit more juice. Give you some juice. How dare we be told we're beautiful, perfect, and whole no matter what we think about ourselves? That's a ridiculous stuff. So let's do the love offering. Thank you for your financial expression of appreciation so much. Also, those of you online, if you'd like to make a financial expression of appreciation, just go to my website, earlpurdy.com, P-U-R-D-Y. As this is what I do in the world, so I really appreciate that you feel moved to financially share and support my teaching ministry. I'm available. I've been doing some incredible clarity sessions lately. It's been amazing.
Doesn't surprise me.
It's been amazing. It's been a whole nother level of stuff coming through that's been awesome, that I've been very pleased with how the Holy Spirit's been using my body. And if I'm available to work with you on how to see it another way, no matter what you're going through right now. And there are no original problems. There's a lesson in the course that says, let me recognize the problem so the problem can be solved. And then it says, let me recognize the problem has been solved. And so that's what we do in the clarity session. We actually get a chance to see how the problem may have been solved and is solved. And there's another way that you can look at it to have it that way if you choose. One thing I've noticed over and over again is there is nothing that a person can ask that the course doesn't have an answer to. But that doesn't have anything to do with whether or not the person uses it. You know, it's like Spirit gave me this really cool analogy the other day about, you know, if a person comes and they, want to get an insight into the way of seeing things, like this is the symbology of an astrological chart is like the same symbology as a GPS. I can show you the easiest way to get to your destination, but how you get there depends on what kind of driver you are. Mm-hmm. And see, that's the missing factor that most people don't realize in counseling. You can be given the thing that will absolutely work, but if you're a poor driver, and by poor driver, you are so caught up in your anger, your guilt, and your grievances, and your sense of separation, then you're not going to let yourself use the easiest way to the destination. And that's what I had to stop letting myself get frustrated about years ago as a counselor, because I would be like putting my heart and soul in being a channel for a person to have another way of, and you know it'll work. You've seen it work a million times. And what you run into, what the course says, is that people don't think they're worth the effort, that the person themselves do not think they're worth the effort. And that's why they don't act on anything that they've got. Not that it's beyond them. They don't believe they're worth the effort to do it. So I want to tell you, you are worth the effort, that you are a treasure, that you are valuable. And your Savior is just someone who never lets you forget that, no matter what you think about yourself. Those are the kind of friends and lovers and partners you want. People who will constantly be willing to mirror your value back to you until you realize it for yourself. And that's not codependency in a negative way. So don't go, isn't that codependent? Yeah, we all codependent. We are codependent. But you just need to decide what message do you want the people in your life mirroring back to you, and you'll know what you value by who you hang around and what they're about. That's how you know. That's the easiest way to know, even though that upsets some people. And I don't mean intellectually they have to always be talking at this level, but it's just a loving, caring person that is seeing value in you and what you are about is what I'm talking about. Do the people around you mirror that you are a beautiful, valuable person? It's not complicated. It's not rocket science. So the people you're attracted to say a lot about you, especially the ones you feel passion toward. Pay particular attention to the ones that you feel passion toward. That you've been nailed to the wall. No pun intended. You know what I'm saying? You know, at that point, because you know when you're around the people and all of a sudden you get what you call turned on. Why are you turned on? That's the question you should ask yourself. Why? What is it for? What do I want to come out of this? It's a good question. The course said you should take into any situation or circumstance. So I just wanted to share that with you. Those of you online, thanks for making the comments. And we're going to do a Tuesday night Way of Mastery class at 7 p.m. Mountain Time on Facebook Live. And Thursday, we've been doing a hardcore Course in Miracles. All of these are posted on YouTube and on Facebook, and also the class on Sunday. And then when I finish this up, then Sheila's going to make an announcement also too. Okay.
How did you know?
Yeah, I'm psychic. I'm psychic. Hey, all you can see is yourself. That's what they tell me. That's what I heard. I don't know. I love to hear people talk. I mean, if you listen, if this is true, and the only thing a person can see is the ego that they're making up for themselves and what they think about themselves and what they're making up for everybody else, then there truly are no private thoughts. So if you just listen to people, especially when they think they're talking about others, if that's not the clearest indication of the kind of person you're going to be dealing with, I don't know how anybody could make it any clearer. Because people in the world feel very comfortable talking about other people. Because they really think they're talking about other people. But if they're doing it around a being that's waking up, that being knows that that person is showing you how their mind operates, what they focus on, what they value. And that should be enough to make you not give them your phone number right there. Just to take a minute to just listen. And just, it's like, what do they talk about? That's simple. Does anything ever come out of their mouth that's reflecting any level of personal responsibility? And that they are the ones that's creating their experience. That's the simplest thing to look at, is how much responsibility versus how much blame you're hearing this person in their conversation. It's really simple. That's what we got to be aware of. It's a lot more. It's a lot simpler than what we thought it was. Okay, so one thought you heard today that you want to take out of here with you. Anybody? Something you want to remember?
The first paragraph of the second came together for me. The ego is only an idea, and then it was talking about the history. So what came through for me was history is always only an idea, not a fact.
History is only an idea, and it's a bunch of opinions about what happened.
That's right.
Yeah, that's deep. Anybody else?
You feel as like attached and loving of your higher self as you are of your ego someday. Yeah,
one day you'll be more in love with the loving self as you are with the part of you that's got serious issues.
No question.
Yeah. Anybody else? Jason.
What I'm feeling is there's an example of who I really am does not change, and I can give an example of that by looking at how my ego changes as I age and how I view myself.
Right.
But I still feel deep down as the same person, the same being. So that sameness, that's who I really am.
That's the unalterable.
And the rest of it is just my story.
Yeah, the rest of it is your story. Beautiful. Anybody else? We're going to work our way around. We're going to work around.
I was just going to say that, attainment doesn't have to be complex or, really hard or kind of ethereal. It's just, if I know there's another way to look at things, I've reached the highest level of attainment I can get here.
Wouldn't that be relaxing?
Yeah.
Then all I do is work on the other way of seeing things. Yeah, instead of going, okay, I got to get to this other higher level. Just what's the other way of looking at things?
So I can start my car with my key, not with my shoes.
I think it would be more successful in the long run.
Knowledge is love.
Knowledge is love. Love is knowledge. And don't forget that it says that you look at your ego the way that you would feel like an animal feels about its offspring. It's our baby. We made up our image of ourselves. And so we protect that image the way you would protect a child. And then one day you'll be just as protective of these loving thoughts about yourself as you are about the thoughts that are based on fear and guilt.
We have several great ones on here. Rose says, I can't get rid of my ego and mustn't try to. I must recognize my ego. Then I can laugh at it.
Laughing at the ego is the best way to get rid of it in that sense. And you will get to the point that you'll just start laughing at the stuff that you do through your images and thoughts about yourself.
Jamola says what impacted him was that he constantly throws away knowledge and he doesn't have to.
He constantly throws away knowledge and doesn't have to. And what he said we threw away was the knowledge of God, the knowledge of love, the knowledge of how innocent we are. So we just need people around us that help us remember what we don't want to forget.
Well, like what was said before, is like the highest level of ego is when you ask, I want another way to look at it, and then that you're starting to see that you're not the ego.
Yeah, you are not your ego. You are not your fear. You are not your ego. And don't forget, y'all, all you got to do if you want to tune into the live broadcast is go to www.facebook.com/Earl Purdy Live, whether you're on Facebook or not. So we're going to take 10 seconds to say to ourselves, I am not my ego. I am not the ego. Say, I am not the ego. 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 I am not. And tell somebody, you are not the ego. 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 You are love. 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 You, and don't forget that you are juicy and cute. Oh, don't forget that part. You are juicy and cute. You are juicy and cute. I'm telling those people there, you are juicy and cute. And don't forget that you are not the ego. You are not the ego. We are not the ego. We are not the ego. We are not the ego. Yeah, give it up, mighty companions. You got to juice it up. You got to boog it up. You got to get your bodies involved. Now, where is Miss Sheila? And let me tell you, may the course be with you.
May the course be with you. Thanks, Earl.
You are welcome, darling.
First of all, I wanted to say, and